Hello everybody, welcome along to this video, which is Mr. Johnson Teaches Sheila Birling Revision, one of the series of videos I've put together which recaps and revises all of the main characters from An Inspector Calls as you get ready for your GCSE exams. This video is part of the series, as I say. Do check out the other ones on the channel, and it's also An Inspector Calls is part of your GCSE English Literature. It's paper 2 and it's section A, so it's the second lit paper that you sit and it's the first part of that, with the other two sections on that paper then being the poetry. Be ready to pause this video, and making your own notes is always really important. I emphasise that in all my videos. The reason being that firstly you'll have something to look back at with your notes, and also secondly it makes you much more active and you'll be paying more attention and you're likely to remember more information as you do so. So let's get moving then. Be ready to pause as and when you need to. So who is Sheila? Well, firstly, to recap the simple basic bits, she's the daughter to Arthur Birling and Sybil Birling, that's Mr. and Mrs. Birling in the play, and she's the sister to Eric. She's unmarried at the start of the play and indeed at the end of the play, but she does become engaged near the beginning to Gerald Croft, who's another business owner. She had Eva Smith fired from her job. That happens about a third of the way through the play. She believes that the girl was laughing at her and she got very jealous and had her fired. And she is a character who shows emotion for her actions, as I've said there. Guilt, regret and remorse being three very good words for Sheila. I also like the picture that you've got on the slide there as well. These are taken from a BBC version of about 2015, and just the way that she's playing with the engagement ring sort of is quite symbolic really there. So let's move on then. So what does she do during the play, and does she change? This is a summary of some of the actions, some of the main actions in the play. I'll just flick through them quickly for you. So she starts the play by accepting Gerald's proposal. That happens very near the start. She particularly shows sort of attention towards the engagement ring, almost maybe making her seem quite sort of shallow. The fact she's more interested, perhaps you could say, in the ring, or certainly shows a real interest towards it and what it represents. She then leaves, leaving the men to have their gathering together after the meal, meaning she doesn't hear the inspector at first and see him arrive and interrogate her father. She's the second one to be interrogated though, and it sort of reveals that, as we said a minute ago, she had Eva Smith fired from Millward's, which was this shop, whilst Sheila was trying on a dress. She believed that the dress looked better on Eva Smith when it was held up against her to sort of get a feel for it, and then she thought she caught her smiling behind her back while she was looking in the mirror and saw the reflection of this girl laughing, she believed, and she used her influence to get her sacked from the job. She breaks off the engagement with Gerald after discovering his affair with the same girl. And as the play goes on, she seems to understand the inspector. She almost seems to sort of know what he's up to and what he represents, in the sense of she just sort of sees where he's going with everything and almost knows what's coming before the other characters do. She's quite an insightful character in that sort of sense. And finally, she continues to show remorse at the end, even when the inspector's identity is in doubt and they're not certain whether he was or wasn't a police inspector. She has changed. That's a really important thing for you to remember about Sheila Birling. Unlike her parents, who almost temporarily show some remorse and regret and then quickly change back to their old ways, Sheila and her brother Eric both sort of maintain that feeling of sympathy and for their actions. Here's a few key quotes. There are so many quotes for all of the characters that you could choose. I've chosen just a few here. You don't need to memorise lots and lots of quotes off by heart. It helps if you would know maybe a few key ones, and certainly even just a key word or two from the quotes. So with the time I've got being limited, I don't want to spend too long on this video and make it too long. So the first one there is taken from the beginning. I just would point out this is where she's sort of looking at the engagement ring from Gerald. And oh look, it's wonderful. Look, mummy, isn't it a beauty? So you've got that idea of her sort of obsessing about the ring there, but the fact she refers to her mother as mummy, it sort of firstly reveals something about class, because it was a very upper class thing to do to talk about mummy and daddy even when you're grown up. But also it just maybe gives us a sense of immaturity for her. At the start of the play, she does seem like quite an immature character, and by the end she's done a lot of growing up because she's sort of accountable and feels bad for her actions. The next bit below is a stage direction. Now don't ignore stage directions because they're really important. Half serious, half playful. This is at the beginning when she's talking to Gerald. Just shows that she's got a real edge to her as a character, I think. The fact that she's sort of half being serious and half being playful, and you maybe couldn't tell which it is. The quote below that is a really good one when we're talking about socialism and sort of looking at change. These girls aren't labour, they're people, she says to her father. And it just sort of shows that she sort of sees the world in a very different way to that he does. But it didn't seem to be anything very terrible at the time, and if I could help her now, I would. There's a great quote for her showing remorse for getting Eva Smith fired from the job. And then beneath that, why you fool, he knows, of course he knows. That's said to Gerald, like when Gerald wants to try and hide things from the inspector. This is what I meant about Sheila almost sort of seeing through the inspector a bit. Beneath that, that's a really great quote as well for just talking about the class system in general. You mustn't try and build up a kind of wall between us and that girl. If you do, then the inspector will just break it down. So a really metaphorical quote there as well, but also very good, as I said, for like the class system and not trying to have barriers between them and us. The bit below that, near the end of the play, when they're sort of talking about the inspector maybe not being real, and she says bitterly, I suppose we're all nice people now, sort of an edge of sarcasm, where of course she doesn't believe that in any sense. And the quote at the bottom almost linking with that as well, I want to get out of this, it frightens me the way you talk. Talking to her parents there about the fact that they just sort of given up any idea of sort of showing any regret because it turns out the inspector wasn't real and therefore they believe it just doesn't matter. She doesn't see it that way, of course. So what does Sheila represent? It's really important to look at the characters. Priestley used them all as a function. They all serve sort of a role in the play and they are there for a reason. So what about Sheila's? Well, she certainly represents upper class woman in this sense. She's about to follow society's expectations, I've put there, by being married off to a wealthy man. So in that sense, she is sort of going through what she's meant to do. She's also very importantly, though, a representation of the younger generation. And perhaps Priestley uses them to show that there might be hope for the future, in the sense of Sheila shows that regret and remorse and looks like she's going to change because of the incident with the girl, and that's why those two words at the bottom there really are important. So she is sort of stereotypically upper class, but then starts to change through the play, unlike her mother. So what themes could you link her to? This by no means is a list of every theme, but it's certainly some of the key themes. Power, definitely the younger generation, and responsibility is a really key word. You could link all of the characters to responsibility in some way, but Sheila, you could argue, takes responsibility, unlike her parents, who do not seem to take responsibility for their actions. There's remorse, class, guilt, family. Socialism is an interesting one maybe for her as well. You could not and do not call Sheila a socialist, but at the same time she sort of has socialist ideas, you could certainly say. It's about being delicate in the way you phrase it. Possible exam questions for her then? Well, she has come up in a couple of ways. The first one at the top there is a direct question from May 2019's paper where it uses Sheila. How does Priestley present Sheila as a character that learns important lessons about herself and society? So with that sort of question, I'd certainly be trying to find a quote from the beginning, maybe the quote about Mummy, the engagement ring quote, and showing her as being naive, and then contrast that with the quote at the end. It scares me how some of you people talk, or scares me how you talk. And maybe in the middle you could talk about how you mustn't build up a kind of wall between us and the inspector. Those three quotes I've just used there, almost a bit of a beginning, middle, end structure that I try and encourage my classes to use, would work really well for there. Either way, that first question gives you an example that Sheila has been used, but the same question, you get given a choice of questions on the exam, and there were 2 questions that year, and the second question in some ways could also be linked to Sheila. That would be up to you to make that choice, and the exam board are happy for you to choose the character. So how does Priestley present selfishness and its effects? You could look at Sheila's selfishness and what she did to get Eva Smith fired, and then contrast it with her actions at the end, and how actually she feels sorry and almost sees her as more of a human being. Beneath that, under suggestions, the bit in brackets is a sample assessment material, is what SAM stands for. So when they created the first exam papers as examples, the differences between older and younger generations came up. That was a few years ago. It's possible something like that could come up again soon. And how does Priestley use Sheila to show the importance of change? It's a question that I've made up, but one that you could maybe attempt as well. So just going to keep this video to under 10 minutes. There are some recap questions that you can have a go at now that would help you understand the character. You should find all of those answers somewhere within the video that you've just watched, and if not, double back and watch again. And that's where I'm going to end it. Thanks for watching this, which is my video going through Sheila. Remember, there are other character videos on my channel and all sorts of other bits that will help you with your English more generally for literature and language. Good luck when it comes to your exams, everybody. Thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.